To the Consulting Leaders Podcast, where we talk about the business of consulting. Whether you're looking to grow your practice or learn from the stories of leaders in consulting, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Guillaume Jouvencel, ex-PwC and co-founder of GHA Marketing. Join me as I interview the best consultants in their niche. Let's get on with the show. Rick, welcome to Consulting Leaders. Happy to have you.
Hey, thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Let's do this. What pulled you into consulting, Rick?
You know, I think as a kid, I always wanted to be, something in business. I didn't know what consulting was at the time. And when I went to school for engineering, somebody described it to me. I was just like, oh, wow, that sounds like the coolest thing ever. And then I had a restaurant probably about 25 years ago now. And I saw that and while I was able to build my company, I was able to build it successfully. I noticed there were a lot of smaller companies that weren't able to grow. They were just, stuck at a one-person, two-person shops. And I was like, you know what? I know how to solve that problem. And so I worked with another company, for a while and began, consulting for some of their clients. And then, I decided to spin off on my own. And I've been consulting for about 20 years since. Just really focused on operations, how we get a company to, go from a single person, a few people up to, 20, 30 people, whatever that would look like, and how to plan strategically, how to look further down the road and find the opportunities that exist and, build the company to support that.
So what's the number one challenge, the number one problem that you solve now for your clients? Like, what is it that you help them with after this journey?
I have really two different veins that I've seen like over and over again. And it really has to do with, having a real advantage in the market. Well, let me be plain about that, is being able to help customers, potential customers really understand, the nuts and bolts of a company or what makes one company different from another. One of the examples I use is like, we look at a McDonald's, we look at a Chick-fil-A, and you clearly know that there's differentiation between the two brands, not just the food that they serve, but how they do business. And so I find that a lot of founders have really, really good ideas for their companies. It's like, hey, I want to do this thing, but they don't necessarily have the time or the bandwidth or the expertise to really exploit that to its greatest opportunity in order to create that advantage, that uniqueness in the marketplace for their company. And then the other side of that is there are companies that, they're doing, almost a commodity business, and they don't really understand that there's opportunities for them to really differentiate in the marketplace. And so I work with companies, I work primarily with founders in both of those veins, going from, the idea to expanding on the idea to the actual operational impact to integration into the companies.
Why doing both? Why not, hard focusing on one? Why did you decide to have those two veins?
Because in my mind, they're related. When I look at a company, when I look at my work, it's really, I look at it in terms of engineering. I look at it in terms of, let's find a problem and let's find the best way to solve that problem. If you've got an idea, if a founder has an idea, it's going to be a lot faster to get that idea up and developed and on the road and running. If a company doesn't have that idea, we need to sit down, we need to drill down, we need to figure out what that's going to be. It's going to be a longer process, but it's still the engineering. And this is really the thing that I love. It's really helping founders get traction in the marketplace. And I think that both of those are really, really important for different companies at different phases, obviously.
That sounds fair enough to me. So tell us a bit more about your ICP. Like, who is it that you're helping specifically? Is there a specific niche, a specific company size? Who's the ICP? Like, how do you get into the room where the people who are making the decisions are?
It's really been interesting because it's evolved over time. And I'm finding that I really love working with companies where they're in that formation stage. They've a lot of times they've already started, getting a little bit of traction in the marketplace. They're starting to understand how their companies run, but they're not at that place where they really understand like their market sometimes or what's going to make their markets buy. And a lot of times they'll come to me and they'll say, hey, Rick, I've been trying to grow my company. I've been doing marketing. I've been doing, the tactical things, but they're not really looking at it from a an existential perspective. How do we fit in the marketplace? How do we show up in the marketplace? And so they start off with, really tend to be casual conversations. I had a coach come to me, wonderful human being, wonderful coach, and she goes, "Okay, Rick, I've got this new product list I want to do, or a product offering I want to do," and I'm just like, "Okay, cool, send it to me." And then she sends it to me, and I come up with 15 questions. It's like, and the bottom line was, how do you differentiate what you do from every other coach in the marketplace? And then the other piece of that, because I knew her, it's just like, why are you underselling what your capabilities are? You're using the same language every other coach uses, but in my opinion, she is a higher level coach than the typical coach that's going to be out there. She's a rule breaker. She's a rebel. She's the type of person that gets in the room and says, "Hey, let's smash everything, start over, and let's rebuild." And it's going to be awesome. And she's going to deliver on that. And that's really what I love. I think, we always talk about consultants and coaches being able to come from that outside perspective and be able to offer unique perspectives on on problems that people face. And this is really where I live. So again, a lot of the people that I interact with, I have a podcast, I have a couple of podcasts, actually. I get to talk to people through there, have conversations with people through LinkedIn. It's really been a lot of networking. Now I'm doing some, other advertising, some online advertising to, see if we can do some lead gen that way. But primarily it's been through conversations and relationships.
So we're gonna get into the marketing, and obviously I want to talk about podcast. There is something interesting that you mentioned here, which I think is going to be helpful for a lot of B2B coaches and consultants, which is around, I was going to say pricing, but not only, overall positioning, valuation almost. So what's your recommendation, Rick, to help B2B coaches and consultants understand how they compare versus other people in their space, to understand that, hey, actually my service is much more valuable, because it's quite abstract, right? Like at the end of the day, who am I? I haven't worked with those coaches and consultants. I couldn't say if I'm better than them or less good, and in which case I need to improve and so on. So what made you say for that particular client that you mentioned that she could price way more and that she was way above all the other coaches in that space? And how can people take that home and apply it for themselves?
I think what I saw in her, what I see in her, is that she's got, not only does she have the ability to really understand her customers and her clients and really dig in and really hold them accountable for where they are, she's the type of person that can really see, a little bit of the future, of the potential in an individual. And she can use her process, her system, to really push people to be the best. She's not going to be your typical coach that, is going to work inside a box and say, okay, if it's not within the box, I'm not going to answer that question, or, whatever that is. She's the type of coach to say, what, you're good. If we liken it to sports, you're going to be the best hitter out there. You need to choke up on the bat. You need to do this. You need to do that. The other piece to this is positioning and confidence. If you think about a lot of people, that have been in the spotlight, people that may have had difficulties in the spotlight as well, if they present themselves in a certain way, and if they do that enough, they have the same language, they've created a brand for themselves. People believe that. Whether or not it's true, it doesn't matter. People believe that. Okay, and if enough people are talking about the same thing, then that person develops a reputation. We see sometimes where they have breakdowns, they have things that happen in their career that, hey, I never saw this coming from such and such a person. But the brand itself, this is something that we develop over time through reputation, through, sometimes it isn't even through doing, but it's through helping the audience understand that this is what we do.
I like that. I wanted to take you somewhere with this as well, but I'm going to chip in if that's all right. It's also getting that feedback from people who are seeing so many other people like you. Finding your own coach, finding your own mentor, working with people who are interacting on a daily basis with other people like you. I like the podcast. That's actually the perfect segue. So you mentioned referrals, networking. That's how you get business mainly. Tell me why the focus on podcast. Like you have had more than one. Like, why are you doing this? Why did you get into that? And how are you using it to help you develop your business, Rick?
It's really interesting. I had never pictured myself as doing a podcast. I had never. It was never something that was on my list. But like years ago, I had a company called Converge. It was a marketing company, and the team came to me and said, "Hey, Rick, we need to do a podcast." And so it's like, okay, this is a way where we can get our brand out there, and that was the beginning and end of that conversation. We had the podcast, we ran it for a few years. It was okay. It did what it was supposed to do, and then 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I decided to start the podcast that I currently have, the Relentless Pursuit of Winning podcast. And the thinking was really I wanted to educate, equip, and inspire entrepreneurs. So I see a lot of folks that get into business, and there's always questions. And the biggest question, the biggest issue that I see with entrepreneurs is that it's lonely. People don't really get it. It's mentally taxing, it's relationally taxing, et cetera, et cetera. And so I wanted to create a platform where we give people access to more people that have walked those paths. So I get the stories of entrepreneurs and subject matter experts and operators that have done incredible things. But what I realized is that in having these conversations with folks was that I have deeper relationships with the person that I'm on the podcast with, talking about for an hour. They're sharing some of their intimate stories and their failures and that sort of thing. So there's a much deeper connection with those folks, and those folks turn into people that I can pick up the phone and say, hey, you know what, Kyle, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm working on, do you know anyone, or would you like to participate, or something like that. So these relationships are much deeper than the ones that I would have a casual conversation from LinkedIn. It's like, hey, let's let's do a meeting or a conversation with somebody I meet through a networking group. Hey, let's do a meeting. These podcasts these podcast opportunities are so much deeper. And the thing about it is it's a mutually beneficial relationship, because they will come to me and say, hey, Rick, can you endorse my book on Amazon or something like that? Hey, do you have such and such person you can connect me with? So it turns into a real two-way relationship, rather than, again, just something where it's like, hey, buy my stuff, or do you know somebody that's going to buy my stuff?
Oh my God, this is the topic close to my heart. Obviously, that's what we do. So I love to hear you talking about it like this, Rick. And I'm gonna double down just on a few things, and because we're on the very topic, I think actually, so I host a mastermind where we talk about this. And yesterday, someone who started the podcast 2 months ago was like, I actually like this. I never imagined myself as being an interviewer doing podcasts, but I like it. And that's the feedback that we get from most people who start a podcast and stick to it for more than 3 episodes. I'm going to put that here. The thing is that relationship building, if you're in B2B, it's insane. Like, I didn't know Rick 20 minutes ago. Now we're building a relationship. Number 2 is mutually beneficial. We give you an access to an audience. You give access our audience to your knowledge. We build together. You get something, I get something. So guest and host get something. And then the last thing that I want to mention is the power of the content strategy that comes from it. A 1 hour conversation, scratch that, a 30 minutes conversation can become an audio asset, a video asset, an SEO optimized written article, snippets for social media, make it 3 on 6 social media platforms. That's 18 pieces of content, a trailer, a newsletter. Time is of the essence for B2B businesses, especially B2B coaches and consultants. You sit down 1 hour to create content together with someone in your industry for other people in your industry. You build a relationship and you get a whole content strategy out of it.
Yep.
Yes, it's not direct response like you would fire up an ad on Meta ads, and I get people who say like, I want to buy your stuff, and 70% of them don't show up to the meeting. But like, it's that true relationship building engine, all whilst developing massive amount of content. Yes, we love podcasts. Talk to me about sales, Rick. How do you move from this awareness, those relationships, the content that you put out there, and the referrals? How do you go from that to solution awareness, a first call? Hey, looks like we can do something together. A second call, an SOW, a letter of engagement, and then we start the workshops. Like, can you walk us through your sales motion?
Sure, sure, sure. So, I mean, I want to start out by saying, I'm never going to be a hard sell guy. I don't try to sell people. I tell people about what I do, and a lot of times people will say, "Well, Rick, what would it look like to work with you?" And so that's where that conversation begins. And I'll typically do a little bit deeper discovery just to get a really better understanding of who they are, and make sure that it's going to be a good match, because I never want to put someone in a position where they're not quite a good fit. I'm going to make them uncomfortable, or they're going to make me uncomfortable. What I'm looking for typically with our clients are people that want to be the best in whatever segment, whatever area they're in. It doesn't mean that they're going to be the best furniture company in the world or whatever that's going to be, but for the market that they serve, their goal is to be the best. And so, if they don't have that drive, if they don't have that vision, they're probably not going to be a good connection for me. So we, kind of go through that discovery in the beginning. If we find it's going to be a good fit, then I'll prepare a proposal. I'll walk through that proposal with them, and there might be some things that we polish up. We'll agree on. I typically give a couple different pricing options. We'll agree on what that's going to look like, and if they say, "Hey, you know what, let's go," they'll write a check, and we'll sit down. We'll do the first couple of workshops. We'll work through exactly what we need to work through. I'll create a roadmap from there, and then from there, I do a lot more. I guess you would say, you would call it coaching. I call it more of the Sherpa advisory, where I'm more just showing them what they need to do and showing them, the ins and outs of things. I might get resources and that sort of thing for them. So we have a fixed window of how long I'll work with them from that point.
I like that. And what you're talking about here again too, because you're giving me gold, so I have to dig. Rick, I hope you don't mind. I think what you just walked us through is qualification. I think that's again something that a lot of B2B coaches and consultants don't really have nailed down yet, but really you shouldn't hesitate to add a little bit of friction to your funnel, in the sense of, hey, let's make sure that someone I'm gonna invest my valuable time speaking to, and also for them, makes sense and is both a fit. So like having a few qualification questions and then having a first short call to make sure that it makes sense. Super, super important, especially when you start scaling up and implementing some acquisition channels. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that the partner back when I was working at a big consulting firm myself told me was, Guillaume, there are two types of consultants. There are the hunters and there are the farmers. And he was like, I'm a hunter. I love the smell of fresh blood in the morning. I love to go after the business. That's my jam. And it was like, but the partners making the most money, the ones bringing in the most money and the most projects are the farmers, the ones who are able to take that initial engagement, over-deliver, transform it into a multi-layered, multi-year projects with other teams from the firm. Like those are the big money maker.
Yeah.
How do you farm, Rick?
How do I farm? It's been through content. I mean, I would say that for years, for 20 years, I've written 500-600 different articles, blog posts, and that sort of thing. I've, done hundreds of videos, and I found that developing a visibility and a reputation in a marketplace has been the thing that has opened the door. This has been the thing that has made it easier when I have a conversation with people for them to go and say, hey, you know what, you're everywhere on the internet. It's easy to find you. It's easy to learn more about you. And so because of the way that I continuously create content, as you said, with the podcast, we're putting out, for every podcast we do, we have probably 35 to 50 touch points for each show, and we're putting out 8 shows a month. So, I mean, we're doing the work to get what we do out in front of people. And so that's been really critical. And I've seen where we slowed down. It's like, oh, this social media property is not working or whatever. We've seen the change. And it seems like, one would think that, the website traffic or whatever is not directly related to the post if we're not seeing likes and shares on the post. But, it absolutely does. It absolutely impacts your website traffic if you just say, hey, I'm not going to do the social channel anymore.
So I like it a lot. That is content, nurturing, staying top of mind, getting people down your funnel. My question was also, that's interesting because you're actually repositioning a bit the offer. My question was also around the retention of clients, meaning once you've started engaging with someone and working and delivering work, how do you, sign the next engagement with them, and then the next, and then the next, and then the next. Like keep on providing value and retaining clients. How do you do this, especially with shorter workshops and shorter projects, as you mentioned?
Yeah. This has been really cool. What I'm doing is essentially like 90-day sprints. So the projects that I create for my clients, they're generally, we can implement over 90 days. We can start to see changes in the company. And what I've found over and over again is they say, "Hey, Rick, can we do another project?" So when we do the overall evaluation, we say, "Okay, these are the 10 things that we need to do, or these are the 10 things that your company needs to have. Let's focus on this one or these two or these three for this 90 days. And then we'll look and see what's needed in the next 90 days. Or, if you want to continue on." So, I mean, that's been the piece. The other piece that happens is sometimes they do need actual consulting work. So, I'm working with one company, and they're a younger company. They're about 3 years old, and they've been doing what they do, and they're, making decent money. They've got, regular pipeline of work, but they don't have a solid sales process. They don't have a CRM system that's really, really serving their needs, that's providing them with automations and that sort of thing. And so this is turning into a consulting engagement where I'm going to go in, I'm going to do the process engineering for them. I'm going to develop what the software needs to look like. I'll work with the actual developers to customize the system, and I'll be the one to do the training. So, I mean, I have opportunities like that pop up. It's not my primary offering, but it is certainly something that is a bit of a spinoff. It's something that gives me a little bit more revenue, but also creates more value for our clients, so that our clients don't have to go out and find somebody else to kind of figure out what needs to be done.
I like that a lot. You've been kind of flying through this interview, Rick, let's say the terms. Let me throw a little bit of a curveball at you. What's your number one challenge?
I'll have to, that's a really interesting question. So right now, I'm at a point in my career where I've made some changes. So I had my company Epiphany for 20 years, and we did a lot of cool projects. We did a lot of really cool things, and I enjoyed it. And the company got up to about 30 people at one point, and we were just rocking and rolling. And I decided in the past year that I wanted to do things differently. I wanted to really stop the big picture stuff and really drill down into what I was describing in terms of just helping companies, find and exploit, those strategic advantage opportunities. And this pivot has been, it's been big because I've been thinking about and adjusting and working, and of course, continuing to consult. But the other piece to this is I found a greater desire to continue to build my podcast infrastructure or ecosystem. And so turning the podcast into more of a product where we can, set up and launch podcasts. Now, my goal is not to, let me say this differently. My goal is to provide information and help people, give people the ability and the opportunity to think differently, about whatever category. And so as we see opportunities, we've got to work through an entire pipeline of designing it, funding it, et cetera, et cetera. And so there are these two different related, but different spaces that I'm working in. And so there's always that push pull, where are we going to work? Where's the money going to come from in order to fund, whatever else we're doing? So it's a highly liquid, probably high risk space that I'm in. So that's really the biggest challenge that I'm facing right now.
I have to go down that rabbit hole. So how are you going to leverage the podcast for that? Like, what do you mean with, nailing it down properly, thinking about productization? Like, what do you have in mind?
So one of the things, so we talked about, we talked about the idea of helping companies, figure out what their strategic advantage of. And so the other piece to that is companies don't know how to have that conversation. They don't know what that story is. They can't tell the story about what they do in a way that helps their end customers understand the difference between what they do and what the guy down the street does or the lady down the street does. And so we're able to help people create those stories, and then we're able to help them turn those into marketing assets that they can use in order to go out to market. Now, the related piece to that is if they don't have that story, if that story is not unique, then we can work with them on the other side of the business and help them develop that unique concept that's going to help them, get traction in the marketplace. So the two are related, and I think it's going to be a great opportunity for those that take advantage of it.
So you're doing this with your podcasts by giving them the marketing assets to do this, or you're helping them do this with a podcast on their own?
Well, we're actually creating a podcast just for them.
Nice. Okay. Hosted on your show or
Hosted
themselves?
on my show, yeah.
Interesting. That's really, really good. Well, that was an absolute masterclass. Rick, thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders. If people want to find out more about you, see what you do, where should they go?
The easiest way to find me now is if you go to Rick at bsvsherpa.com. You can just email me there. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm all over LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram. If you go to rpowpodcast.com, you can see my show and you can learn more about who I am on that show as well.
We'll put all the links in the description. Rick, thank you so much for coming on Consulting Leaders.
Oh, it's been my great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Consulting Leaders Podcast. We hope you learned valuable lessons on how to grow your practice and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.
How was that, Rick?